What was it this time? I asked the demon. Charlie had the decency to look chagrined at the blood dripping down the walls. He shoved his hands into his pockets, and the dark red skin on his face darkened further in a self-conscious blush. Sharon broke up with me. My eyes widened. No. Oh man, I'm so sorry. Thanks, he sighed, glancing to the paint I brought over, which matched the bedroom wall of the room he rented in my home. This had happened before, and there was a stash of the paint in the garage for every room in the house, just in case. She just went back to live with her mum, who's still in hell, so I won't even have the pleasure of bumping into her every once in a while. Well, help yourself to a beer or two of mine, I told him. This too shall pass. Yeah. Leaving the room, I heard the buzz of the doorbell, and my pace quickened as I descended the stairs. This giant house hadn't always belonged to me, of course. It was left to me by my grandparents, my grandmother having been a psychic. She'd noticed two spirits here, but told them they could stick around. As long as they didn't cause trouble, of course. When Grandpa died, and then Granny died shortly after, the house went to me, and I was flattered, as I'd assumed I'd be renting for the rest of my millennial life. Granny and Grandpa were still here, of course, in the master bedroom on the 3rd floor, but the house was now in my name. Ghosts can't own property. Swinging open the door, I gave a friendly smile to the woman and her son on the front doorstep. Hey there, I said. The weather outside beyond my property seemed partly cloudy, but per usual, there was a large dark grey cloud that hung over the house, stretching to the edge of the front and backyards. It usually rained every 2 days or so, which meant there was quality irrigation gutters installed to reroute the water. But everything was green all the time, which was nice, and my garden prospered easily. Hi, said the woman tentatively. I'm Harriet, this is Billy. We were coming through town on a road trip and someone told us about this place, and we thought... Of course, sure, I said, nodding. We get visitors all the time. Usually I ask for some notice, it's all on the website, but if this is more impromptu than that, no worries. It's $50 per person, so $100 for the two of you. Her eyes bulged in shock. $100? For a tour of a house? The most haunted house in the country, I corrected her. But seriously, I'm a writer. And an average one at that. I make my money off rent from my residents and tourists. And I sell maybe 3 books a month. This house is my home, but it's also a business. So, what'll it be? Harriet let out an indignant huff, but nodded as she came inside. All right, better be worth it. I make no promises, I replied, which only got me another look from her. Whoa, Billy breathed. At this point, he was only looking at the home itself, which was sizable, well cared for, and over 100 years old, which is ancient if you live in America. So, whoa wasn't uncommon. The woman took 5 20s from her pocket, and reluctantly handed them over. I rang the doorbell 3 times in succession, which alerted everyone to tourists being on the premises, before shutting the front door. So, this is Lawrence House, built by Mr. Lawrence in 1893, I told them. But what he didn't know was that the house was built on a confluence of several ley lines, and choosing this site determined the fate of the house, long before it was even built. Boo! Exclaimed a young man, flying up from beneath the floorboards. The tourists both shrieked, and I grinned at the spectre now floating a foot above the ground. This is Arnold. He lives here and has for about 5 years. He was gruesomely murdered, I said, my voice lowering to drive home the point. It's true, Arnold told them, lowering himself to the floor so he stood there like any living person would, aside from his semi-transparency. That was something he could turn on and off, though, so he was playing a role here for the tourists. I was the victim of a serial killer 20 years ago. He strung me up and slit my throat, draining it into a bowl, he whispered. And it was never confirmed, but some say he was a vampire because, according to him... That is not something I want my son to hear, Harriet cried, covering her son's ears. I shared a baffled look with Arnold before looking back to her. He looks old enough. What is he, 12? 13? 12, she said sharply. You know this is a haunted house tour, I said slowly. What were you expecting? Not tales of serial killers who string people up, she hissed. I let out a sigh. All right, it's not true anyway. Arnold died of a heart attack. The woman blinked in surprise. This house was bought by my grandparents in 1960, I said, leading them into the living room. The looks on their faces to see another demon there, complete with the same red skin as Charlie, plus a set of small horns, was sufficient enough reaction, I supposed. That's Jay. He's one of 2 demons who have a room here, though he prefers to hang out in the living room, extrovert that he is. Hey, guys, he said with a salute. Probably most surprising to the visitors was that he was knitting, halfway through a scarf. Used to the weather in hell, Central Florida wasn't that difficult for him most of the time, but he did have trouble during cooler weather, and especially the few days of winter he suffered through. He spent most of those downright cold days in his room, with a space heater on. Over here is the kitchen, I continued. We stock blood for the demons, though they usually just drink it as a treat, like humans drink wine. And despite my best efforts, sometimes things do break down in the presence of the ghosts that live here, so we try to keep things running smoothly by sticking to older tech. My computer is in my room, which is warded for protection. No garbage disposal. No microwave. Not even a TV. You don't have TV? Billy asked, horrified even beyond when he set his sights on Jay. Nope, I replied. But the hardline internet works in my room, so I can get Netflix and anything else I want to stream. Billy seemed reassured by that reply. I showed them around upstairs next, popping in on each of the guests, the ghosts going translucent. The pipes rattled, the house creaked ominously around us, and the occasional light flickered, but that was just par for the course living here, not purposeful special effects. If anyone lost their temper, I'd usually need to change a bulb or 2, and I joked that I should buy stock in the Philips and GE. We also looked in on Charlie as he continued to paint over the blood trailing down his wall, and he put in some extra effort to look grouchy, though to me he just looked constipated. They had another jump scare as a little girl popped into existence, seemingly out of nowhere, but I skipped the story about how she slit the throats of her parents and haunted the nearest place she could find that suited her devilish demeanor. I also skipped the truth, that she died from leukemia. They were here for the unnatural, and cancer was too horribly familiar. My favorite part was introducing them to my grandparents, who were still as lovely a couple as they had been when they'd been alive. After the tour was completed, I sent the family off with a Polaroid of them with all my tenants, and they seemed satisfied with their visit. But as I went to shut the door behind them, Thomas Russell was walking up the steps to my front porch. Per usual, he looked cranky. "Russell," I sighed, "what can I do for you today?" "I heard that now your haunted house is spreading through word of mouth," he snapped. "This is an affront to God, not a tourist destination." "Can't it be both?" I asked blandly. His eyes narrowed, unamused. "I'm bringing it up at the next town council meeting, and I'm not letting this go just because you brought off the mayor." "Bought off? I bring in tourists," I exclaimed. "I don't bribe him with piles of cash." "Just consider yourself on notice. This will not stand." The man spun on his heel and clomped down the steps from my porch. What was that about? Asked Jay, knitting needles clicking away in his hands, the ball of yarn floating mid-air beside him. Just a retiree with nothing better to do than irritate me, I replied. Shutting the door, I nodded towards the kitchen. How about a glass of AB for you and Charlie? You guys did great with this impromptu drop-in. Oh, neg for me, Jay replied. I'm watching my weight.